What happens when a heavy metal band draws inspiration from an ancient world? We get Powerslave by Iron Maiden. In this video, I'm going to talk about how they use Egyptian mythology to create what is arguably one of their best albums. I've been a fan of this band for about 35 years, and later I'll tell you a story about why I bought this album when I saw it in the record store 35 years ago. I'm also going to talk about the album art and a little bit of a controversy of how they allegedly copied another band from 1977. I'm going to talk about one song in particular and how Egyptian mythology is used in the lyrics, and I'll talk about the other metal bands that have used Egyptian mythology in their music. So let's get into this. Powerslave is the fifth studio album by Iron Maiden. It was released on September 3rd, 1984 through EMI Records in Europe and Capitol Records in North America. The album is now celebrating 40 years. I discovered Iron Maiden when I was a teenager in high school. I would say sometime around 1988. I was about 17 years old. This was not the first album I ever bought. The first one I bought was Somewhere in Time, and I bought it on cassette in a used bookstore. I used to listen to it all the time, and I was intrigued by one song on that album, which was Alexander the Great, because it surprised me that a metal band would be writing about the same stuff that I was learning in history class at that time, given I was still in high school. So one day, I got my paycheck from my part-time job. I was working after school, and I used that money to buy music. I went to the local record store in my hometown, and I wanted to buy another Iron Maiden album. So I looked in the bin and I'm flipping through all the CDs. And back then the CDs had those long boxes, and those were pretty cool. I'll show a picture of it right here. And I'm flipping through the albums and I see this album with this big Egyptian pyramid and Eddie as a sphinx, and I'm intrigued by all this imagery on the album cover, and I'll get to that more in a minute. But the blue and beige color tones really caught my eye. So I decided I'm going to go buy this album. I bought it based on the album cover, and at that time I had never listened to any of the songs. It was just the cover. I went home, I listened to it, and I really enjoyed the album, and it's still one of my favorites. So the album cover was made by Derek Riggs, and he made pretty much all the Iron Maiden album covers at that time. So there's a lot of symbolism on this album, so let's talk about that. I think the main thing is the 5 heads. Some people have interpreted it in different ways. Some people think it represents the band's 5th studio album, or it could even represent 5 members of the band. So in general, the album evokes ancient Egypt. There are themes of resurrection and eternal life. Eddie is portrayed as the pharaoh, and his overall look, it's just possibly their best album cover that they've ever released. The lyrics to the title track also match the imagery from this album cover, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But first, there was a little bit of a controversy. It's not really a controversy. Usually when I do these videos, I talk about lawsuits and stuff, but this is just internet trolls on Reddit with basically nothing better to do. But some people have alleged that Derek Riggs copied the 1977 album by Earth, Wind & Fire called All in All. Now, I have them both on the screen. You can see similarities in the color and the basic format, but according to Derek Riggs, he said he was just inspired by ancient Egypt and it's just a coincidence, and I believe that. I don't think it's any type of controversy, but just one of those interesting things how 2 album covers from 2 completely different bands could be similar. There weren't any court cases or lawsuits or anything like that, so it was just something I wanted to just bring up just to make this video interesting. But now here's the good part of the video. Let's talk about the lyrics. And the main song I want to focus on is the title track, Powerslave, because this song includes lots of themes of Egyptian mythology and other concepts such as power and mortality and death. Later I'll talk about how the song inspired other musicians to write similar lyrics. But first, let's look at the lyrics for the song. First line of the song is, "Into the abyss I fall, the Eye of Horus." Now, the Eye of Horus is one of the most well-known symbols in Egyptian mythology. It represents protection, royal power, and good health. So in the context of the song, when they say into the abyss, it's most likely symbolic of dying and going into the afterlife while being watched by the Eye of Horus. Then there's the line that says, "Green is the cat's eye that glows in the temple." Now, if you studied Egyptian history, cats were sacred in Egyptian culture, especially the goddess Bastet. So the glowing cat's eye probably symbolizes the protective and mysterious aspects of the afterlife. Then another line they say, enter the risen Osiris, risen again. So Osiris is the Egyptian god of the dead, resurrection, and the afterlife. He was believed to have been killed and then resurrected and symbolizes the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Now we get to the chorus. They say, tell me why I had to be a power slave. I don't want to die. I'm a god. So this alludes to the concept of immortality, where the main character believes he is a god-like figure and doesn't understand why he cannot escape death. Then another line that says, when the life giver dies, all around is laid waste. So they say the life giver, most likely referring to the sun god Ra, who was considered the life giver of Egyptian mythology. So when they say laid to waste, it's reflexive that, or it reflects the fear that even gods and pharaohs could face death in their quest for immortality. And then there's another line. Now I'm cold, but a ghost lives in my veins, silent the terror that reigned, marbled in stone. So this is just the death of the pharaoh or god's body are usually preserved through mummification, and they say that in the line marbled in stone, or in the afterlife when they say a ghost. So the album has lots of other songs that are not generally about Egypt, but you have Aces High, 2 Minutes to Midnight, which are about war, and then the epic Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, which is about an old poem. But I'm going to save those topics for other videos because I want to talk about something else. Now, Iron Maiden was not the first time a rock or metal band wrote about Egyptian culture. I thought of 2 songs released before this. I'm sure there are more, but I thought of 2. Then I'll talk about some Egyptian-themed death metal bands. That's going to be pretty fun. So the first one that came to mind was Pink Floyd with the Nile song. That dates back to 1969, probably one of the heaviest Pink Floyd songs ever released. That song mentions the Nile River, which is a powerful symbol in Egyptian culture, associated with life, death, and the divine, which are similar concepts used on the Iron Maiden album. Then I thought about another song called Egypt, the Chains Are On by Dio, which was on their Last in Line album. And this one has the title Egypt in parentheses, the chains are on, so it's about the slaves in Egypt. I did a video on that as well, so I'll link that in the video description. But there are some metal bands that took the idea of Egyptian mythology and history, and they made that the basis of that band. So I'm going to talk about 3 death metal bands. The most popular one is Nile, and they just released an album not too long ago called The Underworld Awaits a Soul. Probably the most popular death metal band about Egypt, and they talk about ancient mythology. So they've been around since the early 90s and probably one of the most influential bands in death metal, but they're not the only band. There are a few more, so let's talk about them. There's a German death metal band called Maat, and they're named after the ancient Egyptian goddess of truth, justice, and harmony. And they've been active since 2009. They released 2 albums, and they have another one that's coming out soon called From Origin to Decay, and that's coming out on November 22nd, 2024. So I'm looking forward to that, and I probably will review it in some capacity on my channel when it comes out. Then there's another death metal band called Scarab, and they're actually from Cairo, Egypt, and their albums are focused on Egyptian history and mythology, and they released 3 full-length albums. Their last album was Martyrs of the Storm, which came out in 2020. So I don't know if they have anything on the horizon, but as we can see in these last 3 examples, there is a subgenre of a subgenre, which we can call Egyptian death metal. I think all the stories from Egyptian history really work well in that context, especially with death metal. So this was a little different how I usually do my anniversary reviews. I know I usually go into the history of the band, and then I do track by track and talk about the music. I didn't do it this time only because I've done a video about that already. So I'm going to put that one right here. That's my review of Iron Maiden's Powerslave, and I go into the history and track by track, and I did that during, I think it was around the time Senjutsu came out. So that is all. Thanks for watching. Please like the video. Helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you're not already. I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more, and classic album reviews. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.